When we read the Torah on a fast day, there's this part which we raise the pitch and we go Ki keshei oirefu v'solachto. So it's Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe is talking to God, and he says, Almighty God, I know that these people sinned with the golden calf. That was terrible. But God, you must understand, they are an obstinate nation, and therefore forgive them. When you read the word, it's perplexing. Like, what do you mean they're an obstinate nation, therefore forgive them? Isn't that a reason why I should not forgive them? And here you are emphasizing, Ki they are an obstinate nation, therefore forgive them. But really, in these words, as Moshe appears to be imploring God for forgiveness for the golden calf, he's actually giving us the key as to how to do teshuvah, how to return to God. Not how God's going to forgive you, but more how you're going to feel forgiven by God. What is there inside a person's psyche that he needs to reach to feel reconnected to God? The key lies in a Medrash Rabbi. The Medrash Rabbi on this pasuk, on this verse, says as follows. It says, on the one hand, Rabbi Yakim says that shloisha chatzufim heim. There are three who have chutzpah and obstinate. There's amongst the nations, uva umes Yisrael. He says that amongst the animals, amongst the birds, but amongst the nations, the most chutzpahdik nation is the Jewish people. That's the negative side. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Radifa b'shem Rab Ami, he says, Atas avur shehu lignai. You think this is disgraceful to the Jewish people? Ve'einoi ela l'shivchan. It's actually praising the Jews. O Yehudi o tzaluv. Either I'm a Jew or I'm ready to be crucified. Moshe Rabbeinu is bringing out the very essence of a Jewish people. A Jew, at his core, is ready to be crucified to remain Jewish. Now you might not notice that on a Jew. It might be very challenging to find the Jew inside the Jew, because every part of his exterior may actually be quite to the contrary. He may be ready to give up his Judaism for anything. But deep down inside every Jew is a Jew. I was reading today about a story that took place between the two world wars in Bucharest, in Romania. So, the Nazis didn't invent AntiSemitism. In fact, AntiSemitism was rampant during those times. And there was one particular newspaper in Bucharest that was spewing out such hatred. And every time they wrote an editorial, it was just somehow to the point. And the Jews got hold of this newspaper and they brought it into the shul and they were trying to figure out, how does the newspaper editor know exactly which passages in the Talmud to quote? They would quote that Toiv sheba goyim haroi, kill the best amongst the Gentiles. And akum sheshovas chayav misa, a goy who keeps Shabbos, a Gentile who keeps Shabbos must be put to death. And that a goy can't learn Torah, that if a Jew has an encounter and a Jew's ox gores a non-Jew's ox, that he doesn't have to pay. Everything taken out of context and misread. All of them were falsities, like completely out of context. And yet there must have been clearly some Jew who knew the Talmud, who was giving them all this information. And they did the research and they discovered that indeed it wasn't a non-Jew who was the biggest anti-Semite, it was actually a Jew. And not just regular Jew, he was actually a rabbi, a rav in his own right. The guy's name was Meir Yitzchak, his name was Michal Yitzchak Vider. This guy was a rav in some little village outside of Bucharest. His father-in-law was a rav in a village nearby, and then he got married, he became a son-in-law, and he became a rav in his own right. But the marriage didn't work out, and he wasn't such a decent fellow, so he didn't want to give a get, and he was going around he left his wife, and he was going around from town to town. He needed to make a living, so he was giving drushes, he was giving pulpit, all sorts of sermons. His father-in-law got wind of it, and he started writing to all the communities around not to accept his son-in-law because he refuses to give a get. So the son-in-law got mad and fuming, and he decided to switch And instead of becoming and he moved over, he became a priest. Instead of becoming a rabbi, he actually became a priest. And he knew the Torah very well, so he appeared back in his town, and he appeared in the garments of a priest, a vehemently, viciously anti-Semitic priest. And he was spewing venom, and all those newspaper editorials were coming from him. So who knows how much of the population in Bucharest was incited by his editorials over there. This guy survived the war, and somehow during the war he came to realize what he had perpetrated. And you would think, what happened to a guy like this? At the end of the war, he came back to the Jews, came back into the ghetto, and he was back into the Jewish area, and he was asking to be allowed back in. And the Jews refused to let him back in. So the youngsters who knew what he had perpetrated were throwing stones at him, were cursing him out. And this guy, this fellow, every single time he would get a stone thrown at him, he wouldn't reply. And when he got a curse at him, hurled at him, he would come back and he would say, I deserve this. He would say, go for it, keep on doing this, because I did something so terrible to my people. And he made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, and the Romanian community made sure that everybody knew who the guy was. And he kept on saying, I deserve it, I deserve it, I deserve it. Now here's a guy with the lowest of the low, and really, is there a way to do teshuvah? But on some level, every Jew has in him a certain obstinacy that maybe he doesn't get it, but the moment he gets it, it's o Yehudi or Tzaluv, as the Medrash says. Either a Jew or crucified. You can destroy me when I get it. What Moshe Rabbeinu is turning to God and he's saying, he's not saying, he's saying, God, this is why you should forgive them. They're an obstinate nation. God, they will stick with you no matter what. You see the Jewish people, they've survived everything in that time before history. Moshe is looking at the Jewish people, he's saying, God, the Jewish people, they're yours forever. They're an obstinate nation, they will stick with you, and therefore you should forgive them. But these words are also how you get to do teshuvah. When you want to do teshuvah, person is religious, that's something wrong, and he wants to feel reconnected to God. How do you feel reconnected? It's through meditating on your own Am Kshei Oref. You look deep inside your soul and you say, what is it inside me that I would be ready to give up my life for the sake of God? So for example, simple example, if there were a war to break out in Gaza, and you knew the Jewish people needed you, would you go out to war? Would you be ready to give up everything to save the Jewish people? Look within your own soul, and you find, what is it inside me that I'd be ready to give up my life for the sake of God and the Jewish people? And when you hone in on that, and you discover what you'd be ready to give up your life for, that's where you achieve forgiveness. So I may have a lot of faults, but inside me, once I meditate and I allow myself to think about the Jew inside me, when I look at a fellow Jew and I look at the Jew inside him, on that level, there you achieve slicha. There you achieve a reconnection. And that's applies between people. When someone messes up in a relationship, it's to focus on what is it that binds me to the other person, where deeper than the mistakes that I make. And that's our relationship with God. And so we call it out with great pride. They're an obstinate nation. Oh yes, an obstinate nation. And if I can focus on that and hone in on that, that's where you achieve a reconnection.